Hello and welcome back to You and Your Money and our special series on getting ahead of the great wealth transfer. I'm Jim Zahansky, Senior Partner and Chief Strategist at WHZ Strategic Wealth Advisors.
I'm Lisa Langevin, Managing Partner Advisory at WHC.
I'm Lawrence Hale, Senior Partner and Chief Investment Officer at WHC.
And I'm attorney Allison Poirier, partner at KKC Law.
Welcome. Together, we'll take you through everything you need to know about the great wealth transfer and how to prepare. So let's get into it. Last time we talked about the sheer scope of the great wealth transfer. With around 84 trillion set to change hands over the next couple of decades, and what individuals and families should do to prepare for that in order to keep their wealth in the family. In this particular episode, we're going to explore what's really new about generational wealth. Beyond the dollars, but really what's changing in mindset, policy, investing, and family dynamics, and how you can prepare accordingly. So, Lizel, in your role as managing partner for advisory at WHZ, I'm sure these are conversations you and your team have had all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we've had a lot of conversations. Again, when that wealth is transferring to the next generation, there's a whole set of new values and ideas on how to invest in, especially for those next younger generations, millennials and Gen Z. They often want to invest in things that are purposeful or that have meaning, find that they are more inclined to invest or have an ESG bent, so environmental, social, and governance bent. And our younger clients, though, they care more about having that financial freedom to be able to have the lifestyle that they want. So we see a lot more travel goals now versus in retirement in that younger generation and those types of things. And so it's definitely a shift and can mean different things for investments and how we put portfolios together.
Yeah, and there's a lot of changing family dynamics as well, Liza, that, couples may not be getting married, or they may be getting married later. Often with families, you have, whether it's a matriarch or patriarch who may be, sort of directing what's going on in the family, that's changing as well. And there are more complex assets that people are dealing with, whether they be businesses, real estate, or other types of assets. So, it's important, especially for the younger generation and younger heirs, to have their values felt as well. And a lot of their values are around transparency, and they want to get started with these conversations earlier. So making sure that there's some marriage between the older generation maybe leaving assets and the younger generation matching those values and having those conversations.
Yeah, and from an estate planning context, it's so helpful to bring those generations, so younger generations, in early, so there's not a big surprise. Because a lot of times they may know kind of a balance of this is what I'm going to get, not understanding it might be real estate, it might be an operating business. So making sure they're aware of that structure, making sure they're ready for that. And if they're not really ready to manage that solo, putting some kind of safeguards in place, maybe some trusts or some people to help manage that inheritance for them in the system and help them make them more successful.
Yeah, it's not often that you have a family where they may have multiple children and all children are capable of managing assets or making decisions at the same level, either through experience, education, or background. And there are different family dynamics at play. Another thing that we're seeing that Liza had mentioned is values being shown through in how people are choosing to invest. She had mentioned ESG, or environmentally and socially responsible investing. A lot of exclusionary investing, where some people may not want to own certain industries within their portfolios because of their values, as well as more complex assets like alternative investments, real estate, and also a big driver of change is technology. Understanding how this younger generation who may be receiving these assets can interact with it through tech-driven platforms and make sure that they're involved in the process.
Yeah, I mean, in the normal idea of someone inheriting some money then allows the inheritor to think through these choices that, Lawrence might be talking about on the investment side, Allison on the legal side. But there are basics that generally are the same, right? I mean, in the end, you don't want to own all technology stocks, right? Idea of having a diversified investment strategy generally has its merits over the long term. Cost controls. Where are you spending your money? If you spend all of the inheritance in 2 years, you likely didn't make it last your whole life if that was your goal. And the other thing that happens is really sort of what are the behaviors that the inheritor changes or goes through when they receive the money. And, having that structure in a financial plan that comes from some legal document that's drafted, a financial plan generally gives someone the idea of what are they going to spend the money on, how much does it cost as people age, and does it meet their own goals?
And one of the things I think a lot of people don't like to think about is everybody thinks they're going to pass away when they're 80 or they're 90, and everybody's going to be heroic, responsible. But as we know, that's not what always happens. So on a very uncomfortable conversation that I really try to have with all my clients is, I know you don't want to think about it, but what if you pass away tomorrow? Yes, your kids may be over 18, so legally they can inherit assets, but how do you feel about your 19-year-old getting $1 million? Is their first call going to be to, the financial advisor, or is it going to be to the Lamborghini dealership? So thinking about not only best case scenarios, but worst case scenarios.
Maybe the best case there is they contact both.
We will empower them to buy the Lamborghini, and then
Assuming it fits into their plan.
Yeah, exactly.
So depreciating us. Yes, probably would recommend that. But could be fun. I think the family dynamics are also something I'm sure that I know we've all seen in our practices and works with clients is, when people inherit money, different family dynamics can come out, and particularly when things aren't clear. I'm sure that Allison, in your work in drafting some of these documents, clarity is key.
Yeah, and just because it can not only clarity in the document. So yes, one kid always thought, well, I was living with mom and dad, so I'm going to be the one that takes over, but not understanding they may have been great at the day-to-day doctor's appointments and, cooking the meals, but the idea of filing a bunch of paperwork isn't their strong suit. So yeah, kind of recognizing who's going to do what, and not just the oldest child or the one living with mom and dad, I think is very important.
But yeah, and just to go back to an earlier point that Jim made about we take a holistic approach with our clients. So they have a financial plan, they get an investment strategy that's tied to their values and also their risk tolerance. And then we're working together and collaborating with accountants and great attorneys like Allison's team to help make that holistic approach really work and make sure it comes together, meets their needs, and it meets what their values and what they're looking to accomplish as well. So it's a holistic view into their entire picture, financial, legal, making sure that it's all operating in the right ways.
And to pick that up, I mean, in the sense that we've all been saying, once you have this plan in place on, legally, you have some sort of legal document or trust set up that is related to your wishes, and your financial plan is set up that way, and, your assets are titled the right way. I mean, it gives you a great opportunity to provide some financial literacy to the next generation, to have some conversations that say, you might inherit this amount of money in this manner, and this is what it means to you. And all of those opportunities really empower the next generation to be as smart or smarter than you.
Mm-hmm. And I actually, on that point, I'm seeing a lot more clients that are nearing retirement. They're in their 50s and they want to include their next generation in these conversations because they said they never had that opportunity. And so I think that's a really cool shift. It used to be that the parents had the meeting and they never spoke about their money. And now we're seeing clients are including their children. They're some of them in their 20s, and they're being included in these conversations. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah, I think it can't be, taxes, politics, and money are verboten conversation topics. It's really critical that, and I think making sure that you're having a open conversation and respecting different generational values and individual values as well, because just because parents want such and such to happen, that may not meet the lifestyle or the needs or the family dynamics of their children, or whoever may be inheriting it.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too. Some of my clients who are still maybe a little bit of the mindset of, oh, well, I'm putting this plan together, but the kids don't need to know, and they don't need to know what I did with my money. It's refreshing to see more and more clients coming in saying, I'm talking to my, 20-year-old just got his first job and you should start that 401k, or kind of here's what we did. And yeah, we did this. So maybe you guys want to kind of start talking about that, or start talking with our advisor and kind of, start with your own wealth planning. I find it's a really nice shift and not so much a taboo topic where, okay, we have money, but we don't talk about it.
Yeah, and the idea of these, whether they're formal or informal conversations, but a family communication, a family conversation, it's something we encourage often at WHZ. It doesn't happen every time we say it, but in essence, we really believe in that communication plan, because again, if you go back just to sort of the dollars that are going to transfer, that's one thing. How it's done, to be sure the next generation understands it, to be understanding the next generation is able to manage it in their own life and has the right plan in place, all starts, as Lauren said earlier too, probably earlier than you think. You don't have to be, you don't have to be dead to have this happen. Yeah. It actually makes better sense to do it now.
And those early conversations, Jim, I think can shed some light for the people leaving assets to the next generation on whether or not the next generation's prepared, and if they're going to follow through with their wishes, if they want to have a level of control. And I think that's something, which Allison, you hear all the time in your practice is, well, I had a conversation with my son or daughter, and they said they're going to, buy that Lamborghini, and the parents may not see that as the most important thing. It may be more geared towards education or something. So how do you typically address those kinds of issues?
Yeah, well, look, first we encourage folks to have those conversations, or at the very least, just look at their kids very honestly and say, do I really think you can handle this? Or if you're really tempted, do I think you're going to be able to resist? And a lot of times, with kids are younger, the answer is just naturally, well, maybe not right now because they're just not old enough. They haven't had a lot of experience with those pressures of managing money. So we talk a lot more with clients about, okay, well, you can still leave money and leave assets to your kids or your grandkids, whoever the beneficiaries are, but maybe more, again, with a trust. So they have access, but not direct ownership. So at least for a period of time, maybe until they get a little bit older, they have some kind of guardrails in place. And to the point, I think, Lizel, you had made earlier about kind of continuing to review these plans, though, because right now my kids are very little. So I have all types of trusts and plans in place just because they're minors, and it's going to be a very long time till they're even 18. So there's a lot more structure in place. But as they get older, we're going to get a better sense of who they're growing up to be. Are they going to be responsible? Maybe the answer is yes, and we can take some of those guardrails off. Maybe the answer is, oh God, no, I hate that they married. So let's keep these in trust in place for longer. So it's also so important to be kind of very honest with yourself about who the beneficiaries are and continuing to reevaluate that.
It's so true. The documents you're describing, the legal, someone thinks how they go to set up a trust, but along the way, their values might change, how they're educated in the next generation might change. You're describing how, legal documents can adapt, how they can change. So, sort of being one and done is likely not the case when you're building a generational wealth plan. It's something you need to revisit often to be sure it still reflects your values, still is adapting to the changes you want in your life and beyond it.
It's something we haven't really touched on, but making sure that if you're in a married couple, making sure they're on the same page.
Yeah.
I think that's, we've sort of taken that as a given, but we don't know. Some clients come in and the husband and the wife feel that they are, have the same one may want to leave assets to the children in this way, and the other may have a very different view of that. So making sure that, again, through those conversations early, that you're coming up with the right plan that fits everyone's important points.
Yeah. So obviously some takeaways from this part of the conversation that relates not just to the dollar amount, but more sort of the behavioral approach, the values approach to the generational wealth. We've spoken about, you sort of have to have a map for the future, whether that's your financial plan and your estate plan together. That could be your map. And remember that map oftentimes it's changing from, you reading the old Hagstrom to now there's GPS and you can pretty much get everywhere. So you sort of have to think about that map changing. You know, you have to make sure your household is aligned. Really what that means is, perhaps, your values may be portrayed in the estate plan and the financial plan. Are your your significant others, are your partners, are they in there? Is it the people inheriting in that? Is that household plan? You also have to sort of look to be sure that your assets are in the plan, and also be sure that the non-traditional assets, like, do you have collectibles, or, how many times clients tell us, hey, I have these antiques. All of these things mean, different things to an estate plan that need to be considered. How do people inherit that? How do you value those things? And I think that's the non-traditional asset review that needs to be included. And then lastly, something we all spoke of, really important, is, sort of what's the governance structure of that, and how do I communicate it so that my wishes are, being shared with the family, but there's some governance structure in legal documents and the way I've titled assets to be sure that they are executed when I'm not here. So lots for people to think about. I don't know if you got anything, anyone, but those seem to be really, really good steps, at least from the financial planning point of view. Anything else to add?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the map clearly is so important. Get your plan in place, get that set up, but then to something we've been chatting about, but reevaluate it. Estate planning, I always remember this old infomercial from like the 90s. I was like, set it and forget it. And it's like, that's not what estate planning should be. Major life events should always prompt you to take another look at the plan, make sure it's still working. Assets have changed dramatically. There's new family members, like the birth of kids, grandkids. People have now gotten divorced. People have passed away. It can impact things, not only like who the beneficiaries are going to be, but who are your executors, who are your trustees, who's going to be the guardian for minor children. So continuing to take a look at the plan as the years go on, and don't just think of it as a one and done planning opportunity. Also thinking about lifelong strategies, or kind of strategies you can implement now. Like you say, don't have to wait until you've died for these things to take effect. Maybe looking at doing annual gifting, maybe looking at chatting with advisors and setting up donor advised funds, again, if you're philanthropically inclined. Or your assets are changing. There's, I'm not going to pretend that I'm very well versed in this, but cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, which I'm sure you guys love it, but people want to invest in those. But to the extent people have these assets, estate planning laws change to specifically address how those types of assets are handled. So again, continuing to update the plan to reflect changes in your life and changes in your assets.
Yeah. So plan. Yeah. It's you think about how long you might be planning for your next vacation. Yeah. Are you spending the same amount of time planning for your estate and your finances? I don't know. I think a lot of people don't necessarily do that.
No.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. That was a great conversation. And so now we'll turn to women inheriting as part of this $84 trillion shift in women's wealth, and what that means and how planning must respond. So be sure to join us once again for that episode 2 weeks from today. And in the meantime, get our free guide, Smart Strategies for Creating Generational Wealth. You can download it at whzwealth.com or at kkc-law.com. It has details about everything we talked about today and a ton more information to help you preserve and grow generational wealth. We'll see you soon for the next installment of Getting Ahead of the Great Wealth Transfer on the You and Your Money podcast. Watch and subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform.